Hello, YouTube world. Hello, all of my people in all of the cities. Shows I'm live on my side. If you can see me, tell me that you are there and just add in the chat room who you are, where you are coming from, what city that is that you're coming from. I delivered to 6 different cities today, so hopefully we've got a bunch of people represented. If you're having problems with the chat room, make sure that you are signed in. So on the top right corner, whatever that is when you're seeing it on my screen, if it shows just a blank photo of a blank profile picture and it says sign in, you're not signed in. I don't think you can join the chat room unless you're signed in. So sign in and just with whatever email address that you have, so it links it up, and you'll be able to participate in the chat room. And again, if this is up on a TV screen projected, make sure it's also playing just on mute, maybe on a tablet, a laptop, a phone, or something, so that you can easily chat in the chat room rather than having to use your remote, because that is super awkward. So, hey Tawana, good to see you tuning in for every class. Some mom says hello, Tawana, and some mom and some pop here. Aiden and Ellen from the hood in Norfolk. Fabulous to see you guys. Hope and Kevin from Williamsburg. Fabulous, great to see y'all. I think this is first tuning in for a class, I believe, for y'all. So, hi Ryan, great to see y'all from Maryland. Awesome, awesome, awesome. No Croatian wine today, Ryan, but we are going to be doing some cool Italian wines. Hopefully we can, get enough Croatian wines in Virginia one day to do a class. Lori and Brad from Suffolk. Oh man, I miss you guys. I haven't seen you in so long in terms of I used to see you several times a month for classes, and I miss in-person classes a whole lot, but I'm looking forward to this weekend for our private Zoom wine tasting. If you guys are ever interested, I do private events on Zoom as well, so a little bit more connected. The reason I do these events on YouTube instead of Zoom is, for one, I get too distracted if I see everybody up there, and for two, a lot of people can't tune in when I do them live. And so having it on YouTube has it just recorded up there for anyone to access at any time. So that's why I do them on YouTube instead of Zoom, for 2 purposes there. So, but I do Zoom events for private events that don't need to be recorded. So Jennifer and Brandon, awesome, from Norfolk. By the way, Jennifer, I almost drove to your workplace in Newport News today when I finally it's a good thing I confirmed the address. So great to see y'all. So, all right. Let me just make sure everybody has everything they need to set up. And then I'm going to explain why this class is probably going to be quite a bit different than the past many virtual classes that I have done since all of these classes started on YouTube. Everyone should have their tasting sheet packet. We have an Italian kind of info page. We have a map, because I believe context is everything in life, and especially in wine. You have your basics of tasting page that kind of just breaks down how we're going to be analyzing the wine. We have your wine aroma chart on the back of that. And then we should have 2 tasting sheets side by side, or front and back, 2 for white and 2 for red. Notice that it says wine number 1 and wine number 2. Wine number 1 is always going to be served on the left. Wine number 2 is always going to be served on the right. So just like you read left to right, we are going to taste left to right. So I'd love to do the 2 white wines side by side. Tasting wines side by side is just, it's like trying on 2 pair of shoes side by side. It gives you a better context of which ones are more comfortable, because you have something to compare it to. So that's why I like doing that. Otherwise, you have no context. So again, context is everything. So if you have your wine glasses, go ahead and pour, I say about 4 or 5 ounces, which is, almost a full glass of wine in both of those. You don't have to finish them. I have, a dump cup, but it allows us to get kind of more expression out of the wine instead of just tiny little pours. The first wine that we're going to be doing should have, the wine bottle should have the right tags, but just to make sure, wine number 1, which is the wine on your left, is going to be the Colli di Lapio Fiano di Avellino from Campania, Italy, and that's going to be on your left, white wine number 1. On your right, white wine number 2, it's going to be Antonelli from Montefalco, which is a region in Umbria, Italy, and the grape is Greco. So that's me white wine number 2. So set yourself up, get your tasting sheets, and of course your pens, your wine glasses, dump cups if you want. Otherwise, enjoy yourselves. Now, again, for notes for food, a lot of people ask me, like, what food do you recommend serving? Is it okay if we eat? Should we not? Do whatever you like. Just know that whatever you're eating will affect your taste of the wine, your experience of the wine a little bit. So while you're tasting the wine, until you like make your final conclusion of the wine, I'd say like hold out on the food. And then once you're like, I've got my tasting notes, then eat and see how the food changes with the wine and how the wine changes with the food. I always recommend avoiding anything too spicy because that will change your basically your mouth chemistry for the duration of the whole class. I also recommend avoiding green vegetables because for a couple hours after eating green vegetables, your mouth chemistry can be a little bit different because of the enzymes there. So if you notice everything tastes like asparagus, it might be because you just ate asparagus, and that's okay. And lastly, avoid blue cheese, man, because talk about like overpowering your mouth chemistry. Blue cheese will just take over everything. Blue cheese pairs wonderfully with some wines, but very few and far between. So I always recommend avoiding those things for your wine tastings. But outside of that, like whatever you want to serve. And if you do want to serve spicy asparagus topped with blue cheese, do it. Just understand, like, just make a note of how that changed the wine there. So, all right. So here's how this class is going to be different than the blind tasting class. The blind tasting class is very structured in terms of now do this test with this wine. Now experience the wine like this. Now put the wine on this part of your mouth. Now make a note about this. Very structured and kind of organized in that way. These classes that are more regional focused are way more about just our overall experience with the wine. So this is as important as you want to make it. If you want to like go through every test and be super analytical about the wine, absolutely do that. I'll briefly talk about each of them, but this is not a tasting class. This is just a fun class to learn about 4 different grapes that we might not have heard of. So of the first 2 grapes, why don't you tell me in the chat room if you had heard of or have tasted, or maybe it's your favorite, either of these grapes. So our white wine number 1 is Fiano, and I'll spell that out here, but you all have it on your bottle, so I don't know why I'm doing that, just in case you're tuning in without the wine. Fiano, and then Greco is the second wine, which with an E, sorry. It's hard to type up here. Greco, there we go. Let me know if you've had either of these wines before, or hopefully it should be new and an interesting experience. If you have had them, then awesome. Hopefully we're trying wines that you really enjoy. So let's do this. Let's like briefly like taste the wines and get into them, and then y'all can sip on them. And I'm going to give a little bit of history of Italy as a whole, the grapes as a whole, and kind of how they developed in each of the regions that we're tasting in. So wine number 1, let's go ahead and pull up that Fiano di Avellino. So anytime that you see in on an Italian wine label a word and then either DI or D apostrophe and then another word, the first word is the grape itself. So Fiano is the grape name. So Fiano is the same thing as Fiano di Avellino. The reason why they put di Avellino is the DI, or short D apostrophe, just translates to from. So the second word is always the village that it's either native to or actually just grown in. So this is the grape Fiano from the village of Avellino. So notice also on your red wine, number 4, we have Nero d'Avola. So that's an example of the D apostrophe. So Nero just means like black wine, because the grapes are super, super black, from the village of Avola. Now, this grape is pretty much only grown there, so it's not called just Nero anywhere else. It's just Nero d'Avola because that is where it is grown. It's one of the most predominant grapes in all of Sicily. So Nero d'Avola is the grape, but it means black wine from the village or city of Avola. So the first white wine is Fiano from the village or city of Avellino. So let's swirl the wine around. If you have a light source behind you, just swirl it with the light source behind it. Not a light source behind you, because that would be really awkward to swirl like that. But you have a light source, put it behind the wine, whether it's a window, a lamp, an overhead light, and give the wine a good swirl. You're looking for clarity here. So how brilliantly is the light reflected through the wine? You're also looking for the legs, how quickly they form and fall, which indicates lower alcohol content, or how slowly they form and fall, which indicates higher alcohol content. To look at color and concentration, which are the other two things on the site page of this Wine 101 tasting sheet, you actually want to hold the wine on its side about 2 inches above a white background. Otherwise, you're picking up the color from all around the room. So if you do that, and actually if you hold both wines, wine 1 and wine 2, side by side, let's see if we can tell a difference. If you are getting a color difference between these two wines, just go ahead and put that in the chat room. I am, but it's pretty slight. They're pretty close. So what do y'all think? Getting any difference at all? Then go ahead and swirl wine number 2. See if there's a difference in clarity and legs in that one. So then we get into smell. So after we've totally swirled these wines around, hopefully they've warmed up a bit in our glass in the last few minutes that they've been hanging out there. The aromatics are going to come out even more the more they are swirled around and the more that they're opening up. So give them some good swirls and then put your nose in between wine 1 and 2. So back and forth is how you're going to best kind of get the whole experience of the wine, how you're going to get the comparison, and how you're going to get the nuances between each of them. So yes, Ada, wine number 2 is slightly lighter. It's wine number 1 has more golden hues. Wine number 2 is definitely more paler in terms of concentration and coloring, and it's more reflecting of the light for sure. So I'm getting, as far as the legs, pretty similar. We'd be splitting hairs between the two. So see if you can just name 1 or 2 things. This is where the wine aroma chart is really helpful. If you're just trying to name something that you're smelling that you can't put your nose on, not your finger, but your nose, get it? So think about, first of all, just how intense is the nose? Is it rushing up at you, or is it kind of reserved and shy? And then if it is rushing up at you, what is first? Is it fruit or non-fruit? And non-fruit can be anything from herbs to floral notes to spice to leather to earth to dirt to smoke to wood. Anything like that is in the non-fruit category. So wines are typically either fruit forward or non-fruit forward, which means something else is driving that flavor bus. So those are the 2 kind of general things I go for first. How intense is it? And what's the driving flavor or aromatic of the wine? Is it fruit or is it non-fruit? And then you can go as specific as you want. When we do blind tastings, we go really specific. We're not going to take too much time here to do that. Take as much time as you want, but I won't dwell on it too long. Then when you finally get into tasting it and jump in whenever you're ready, you want to do what I call just like an initial first impressions taste of the wine, which would be a quick sip of each wine side by side, just to kind of like, I guess we're not shaking hands anymore. We are doing namaste bows or elbow rubs or something like that for people. So that quick first impression, that meet and greet. And so just like so. Ooh, first impression. All right, I kind of already have in my mind the personality of this wine, but we'll see. I'm always surprised when I get to know them more. And then number 2, some similarities, but definitely has its own personality. So the next sip that you want to take, you want to swish the wines around in your mouth more fully. You want to hold them in your mouth longer. You want to swirl them around in your mouth, almost like mouthwash. You want it to coat every part of your gums, your cheeks, the roof of your mouth, your tongue, everything. You can even lean forward and slurp in some air. Breathing in some air, slurping in some air while the wine's in your mouth allows you to smell the wine while you're tasting it, kind of increasing your experience of the wine. So as you do that for both of these wines, really just focus on how they're similar, how they are different. Just kind of break down a couple of these grapes for us here. So by the way, I've actually visited both of these wineries, not the two red wine wineries, but the two white wines. I've met the winemakers and hung out with them and had meals with them, drank back vintages of their wine. It's a really tough job being a sommelier, but someone's got to go to Italy and find out which wines to bring to the United States and make sure that I want to sell them to customers. So I volunteered for the job, and it's been tough, but it's pretty rewarding. So first and foremost, while y'all are tasting through, I'm just going to introduce this wine. So the winery itself is Colli di Lapio. Lapio is a small village in this area. It is near and within the wider region of Avellino, which is in the wider region of Campania. Campania, if you go to your wine map here, is this like more like chartreuse green area in southern Italy, right where Naples is. So we have a lot of Navy people here. You or someone you know is very well, like has connections to Naples or Napoli, as they would say, in terms of being stationed there. Outside of Naples, you go and it's like just country land. It's not cities. It's not tons of civilization. Roads are pretty treacherous sometimes getting through the mountains. I know firsthand. But this whole area has tons of volcanic soil because of Mount Vesuvius. So Mount Vesuvius, right outside of Naples, erupted, obviously, and destroyed the city of Pompeii, and sent volcanic ash plume for miles and miles and miles, like we're talking 150 miles outside of its actual just where Mount Vesuvius is. And it changed the climate of that area for years to come. So we're not just talking about like lava flowing down and changing the immediate area. We're talking about the volcanic ash plume changing the geographic and climate of a larger area all around it. So Campania is like the size of, I don't know, like Virginia and North Carolina put together. I think it's pretty big. It is not a small area, but you have volcanic soil in different types all throughout it. Now, volcanic soil can be either ashy soil, or it can be volcanic hard lava, or it could be pumice stone or basalt. That's like what's actually underneath. So all different types you can have volcanic soil, but it changes the pH balance of the actual, like where the vine grows, and that changes how the vine absorbs its nutrients, and how it accesses water, how it accesses nutrients, and how it absorbs sunlight too, based on the color of the soil. So in this area of Avellino, you have pretty ashy soil. So it's not hard volcanic lava, it is ashy soil. In fact, a little bit further in elevation up, you have an area called Terrassi, which you walk through it, those vineyards, and it feels like your pig pen in Charlie Brown, where there's just like kind of these clouds of dirt following him everywhere he goes. And that's because the ash is so fine. It's so it's just a super, super pulverized fine dust. So once it gets stirred up in the air, it doesn't settle quickly because it's so fine. It's not heavy, so it just kind of hangs out. So if you walk through the vineyards, you can look back and see the whole trail that you walk, so you can never get lost because you know the trail to get back to where you're coming from. So that's how fine it is. In this area of Avellino, it's a little bit more like red volcanic ash. Then further up north, you have this like black volcanic ash. But this particular grape, Fiano, grows really well in volcanic ash, and not all grapes do. So Fiano is one of the oldest grapes. And all of these grape varieties, let's remember, like they all come, genetic parentage, all of the grapes were originally one grape, right? And through cross pollination, they keep evolving into more and more and more species or more types of grapes or grape varieties. So Fiano, if you trace back its DNA heritage back to as far as we can genetically trace this back to, it actually traces back to the 1200s. There's a registrar where someone purchased a bag of Fiano grapes for the Emperor Frederick II or something like that. So on record somewhere, they purchased a bag of these grapes for some emperor, and that's our first recorded history of this grape being an actual registered or an actual locally known grape. So it's pretty interesting. But because it was started to be grown in Puglia, which is further down the heel of the boot in Italy, and Calabria and Sicily, they changed the name to just from Fiano to Fiano di Avellino, so indicating its heritage and its history. So you can't call it Fiano di Avellino unless you're in this region of Campania, Italy. Otherwise, it's just called Fiano. But recognizably, everyone says that the best Fiano comes from this area and is this type of grape. So Fiano di Avellino, most people think is just like white wine, similar to Pinot Grigio, just toss it back. And granted, a lot of it is in this area, but I had the pleasure of trying back vintage Fiano di Avellino by this producer back into the 1990s. And oh my word, stunning wine. So it's age-worthy, it's complex, it's layered, there's a lot going on. Now is when I will ask for your tasting notes, so you know a little bit about the history of this grape and why it is so special and why you should look for it anywhere you go, although it might be hard to find anywhere else. So, all right, let's see your notes here. So number 1, Tawana says, getting some yellow apple. Oh, I missed the comma, and I was like, yellow apple wine? I'm not sure what that is. Okay, sorry. Wine number 2, picking up on something unfamiliar, not a fruit-forward smell. Okay, interesting. Oh, just spilled some wine there. No matter how big the wine glasses are, if I'm swirling wine on live camera, I will spill it out of my glass. You're right. There is definitely some more earthy notes, almost a little like mushroomy on wine number 2. Cool. So 2 seems more citrus fruit on the nose and some minerality. Yes, loads of minerality. Both citrus fruit on both of them. I think like the first one has more like citrus oil. Like if I were going to have a lemon candle, like that's the smell wine number 1 would be. Versus I get like the peels of the citrus fruit, almost the more bitter components of the citrus fruit in wine number 2. Definitely not like juicy and fresh, but loads of citrus, loads of minerality, and some other than fruit quality to it. Love that for wine number 2. So initially thought wine number 1 had higher acid, but after tasting in different order, changing your mind, wine number 2 has higher acid. Awesome. So if you're tuning in and haven't tuned into a class before, this is where we're going through right here, the taste here. So acid's the mouth-watering effect in the back of your mouth. So after you swish and swirl the wine in your mouth, you can lean back, touch the tip of your tongue to the roof of your mouth, and breathe in. You have to swallow the wine first. Breathe in. And then notice how much your mouth is puckering, right where your salivary glands are. You can lean forward and feel the mouth watering effect. So the higher the acid is in the wine, the more you are going to feel that effect of both puckering and watering. And yes, the order in which you taste the wines changes that effect drastically. So every time I think I have a handle on wine, I purposefully will switch the order up to make sure that I have it right. And oftentimes I find myself reversing my mind. So great comment there. So Jennifer says, golden apple and racy acidity on number 1, more minerality and some vegetal and saline notes on number 2. So we're getting a little bit more of that salty thing. I'm going to taste them in just a second, but all right. I don't know if I'm crazy here. Smell number 2. Tell me if you smell Play-Doh. Like it's been a long time since I played with Play-Doh, but I did babysit my nieces the other day. And we brought it out. It smells a little bit like Play-Doh to me, but it's kind of dissipating. I don't know. I believe in trusting your first impressions and just saying the first thing that comes to your mind and seeing what sticks. Number one, is it aged in any oak? We actually do have some oak aging on the Fiano, but it is super old oak and it's very large barrels. We're talking like 45 hectoliters. So we're talking 10 feet tall, 8 feet wide Hungarian oak that's used over and over and over. So what we're getting is not necessarily the oak imparting flavor to the wine, but more the texture of the wine when it's aged in oak instead of stainless steel. So great question. Let's see, number two is actually not aged in any oak. I believe it is 100% cement, but it might be cement and stainless steel. So great questions. First taste, I liked number one better, but I love the higher complexity of number two. Interesting. So that's the fun of wine, right? Like we could just have a natural preference to one, but we could also recognize quality and complexity in a different wine that even might not be our favorite of the lineup. So it's good to see that. Lori says, whetstone and saline on number one. So we're actually getting a salty component on both of these wines from a couple different people. So super cool. Wine number two, some apricot with higher acidity and yes to Play-Doh. Okay, great. Thank you, Lori. Not crazy. Well, totally crazy, but maybe not crazy and saying Play-Doh. All right. So I'm going to taste through these wines and then we're going to talk about the Greco a little bit more in depth. If you have been tuning in with me for a lot of these classes or in my in-person classes either, I just made a change after doing this 3-hour-long tasting on Zoom with a couple different people. I realized that I was very, not defective, but maybe that is the right word, deficient. I was derelict in my duties as a sommelier to skip over this last section. So I kind of always blended balance, complexity, and final into just the taste and palate. But what I'm doing when I'm making you go through all the steps of this, both the sight, the smell, the taste, is separating out each component of the wine. It's kind of like to understand how a car engine works. You want to take apart every individual component of the engine to figure out its individual use and structure and benefit. But then all you know is the individual use and structure and component of each individual unit. You have to put it back together to understand how the engine works as a whole, and that's the point of the engine. The point of the engine is not, you know, the belt or the oil thing or whatever parts of an engine there are. I obviously have never taken apart a car engine. The point is how it makes the car run. So what we're doing, this overall conclusion, is we're putting the parts back together. So in terms of balance, how does everything come together? How do all those flavors integrate and meld into one cohesive unit? Complexity, how much is going on? Are we talking like a 2-cylinder or a 16-cylinder? Again, I don't know if those are real things in cars, but the more things going on, the more complex the engine is going to be. I need to pick a better analogy for the next time I say this in a class. And then intensity is also different than complexity. So a wine could be really intense and all up in your face, but it's actually really kind of superficial and not complex at all. It's just like a 2-note wine. It's just very loud in those 2 notes. A wine could also be intense and complex. So a little bit there's a lot of options there. And then the final conclusion, and I don't ask you this until the very, very end because we cannot come up with a final conclusion of our notes on the wine until we break it all down, right? Do you like the wine? How did they all come together? What situation would this wine be appropriate? How would you enjoy this wine best? With food, without food, summertime sipping, or wintertime by a fire? What's the situation? And how did this speak to you on an emotional level? When you hear a song, you don't just hear, oh, I hear violin and drums and the singing. There's a tambourine over here, some people stomping. Obviously talking about Mumford & Sons. but you hear the whole thing and it either speaks to you or it doesn't. So that's what I'm asking. So we got down to the scientific part for the first all sections, especially when we do the blind tasting. Now I'm just asking like more of an emotional response from you. Did you like it and why? So I'm going to taste through these wines real quick so I know what y'all are talking about, and then I'm going to go through what Greco is and why it's a really cool grape. So tell me in the comments if you had an impression of Fiano. Do you like it? Did you have an emotional, positive reaction to the wine? Wow. Yeah, I can't get over like the lemon oil. Tastes almost like chamomile tea too. This it's like green honeydew, yellow apples, bright acidity. It's super refreshing, but the palate, the mouthfeel is actually a little bit richer and weightier on that Fiano. So it's not just refreshing and tart and light-bodied and crisp and toss it back. It's got some depth and complexity to it for sure. I like the minerality. It seems to be a little bit more of like a softer minerality. It's not scraping my tongue or anything like that. I find this wine, Fiano, often to be a really beautiful balance between what I call a feminine white wine and a masculine white wine. So it has some bitter components, has this minerality. It's got this like depth, this kind of like oily, kind of grip your tongue texture, but it's also got this like beautiful floral lift. So the wine speaks to me on honestly quite a lot of levels. And if I close my eyes, I can imagine when she gave us a bottle of this to take on the train with us to drink at night, which we should have, but instead we opened it on the train and just drank it on the train on our next on the way to the next stop. So I would see this beautifully with like a lemon chicken piccata. I would see it with almost some like some pork banh mi sandwiches. I think would be delicious. That kind of briny component to it. Yeah, I really just like I want chilled white pasta with this. Like orzo salad, even something with I wouldn't want something with too much olives in it, but something with some feta, that little like a little saltiness, but not over the top, because the wine already has kind of that little salty finish. So. All right, so what y'all saying about this Fiano? So wine number one, some peach and apricot notes too. Yeah, absolutely. Wine number two, with lots of layers, picking up on more hints of honey with citrus in addition to the mineral flavors. Okay, haven't gotten to number two fully yet, but I can totally see that. So, so some mom wants wine number one alone. Does that mean you're not sharing with me, some mom? She just laughed. She didn't actually answer. So we have her answer here. And number two with food. She says, I have the bottle. So I guess I am part of the equation. Number one, porch wine. Number two is definitely for a meal. Okay, awesome. Some pop likes two best with or without food. Oh, both. Oh, so you just like number two best, with or without food, doesn't matter. Okay, gotcha. That was a question for a second, and I was confused because you were the one typing it. And Lori says, I like the Fiano. May possibly have had it when we were at some vineyards in Mount Vesuvius region. Okay, cool. Definitely, because it's like one of the key white grapes in that area. So highly, highly suspect that that's a possibility. Group was more of a fan of number two. Surprise, we have always been a fan of more Montefalcos and Orviettos. Cool. Awesome. Speaking of Orvietto, let's get into Greco, what it is, where it comes from. Yes, and so Lori, I always give an email to everyone in the class of the price points after the class, but I don't want people to have an idea of the price point before, because that leads people to believe, to have a conclusion about the wine before I want them to. So if you know wine's $30 and one's $15, you think you're gonna like the $30 one more. So if I have the opportunity in these virtual classes to avoid giving price points until after the class, I do that, but I will definitely give those price points. And both of these wines will be available in the future for sure. Okay, so Greco, we are in the area of Umbria, Italy. So if we So we're in Campania here. We're going to take a train, and it's going to take about 8 hours up to Umbria. We didn't take a train, though. We drove a car, and there were so many mountains, and I got so car sick we had to pull over multiple times. It wasn't fun. So Umbria in central Italy is the only landlocked state in central Italy. So it doesn't have a coastal influence at all. So you get hotter summers, colder winters. You also don't have any of this like sea salts in the air. There's also like no seafood culture in the Umbria culture and history and reputation. So they're really into eating wild boar, and everyone loves shooting those wild boar because one herd of wild boar can trample an entire vineyard and ruin a harvest. So you have to like build up these kind of stone walls. They still jump over those, and you're not allowed to actually build fences in a different way because it's you're trying to preserve the heritage and the natural environment. So winemakers out there have a very difficult time fighting the wild boar. So yeah, they celebrate eating wild boar quite a bit. And so wild boar or pig or roast, as we would think of a big pig roast, very popular out there. So whenever you think about what food to pair with any wine from Umbria, always go with pork. So Grecchetto is the grape. It's typically blended, and great point there to the Di Nicolas in Williamsburg. It's typically blended in what's called an Orvieto wine. So Orvieto is an actual village in a specific region, and it's usually Trebbiano blended with some Grecchetto, also sometimes some Chardonnay, sometimes some Verdelho, but primarily it's a Trebbiano grape, which is a super light bodied, very crisp, very bright. Think Pinot Grigio without the green apple kind of thing is great. It's a great way to describe Trebbiano. Grecchetto is similar to if you were part of the last class where we did an Arnase. And Arnase is a little bit richer, rounder, more dense style of white wine. And it's a great alternative to me when I want to get someone who likes Chardonnay, wants to experience some other wines. This is like one of the first steps I go to, sometimes a Grecchetto. So it has a lot of the same notes, some of the funkier notes, a lot of just like the brown pear, brown apple side too. Still the citrus notes that Chardonnay has without the oak and the butter. Yes, so Grecchetto is named from its Greek origin. So it was a Greco wine, so Greco or Greek. So basically planted since the Greeks were around there. Super thick skin, so sometimes we'll get some bitterness in the wine because the skin is so thick. So if it spends any contact at all, that juice spends any contact on the skins before it's pressed off and taken away from the skins, you will get a richness and a bitterness, almost like tannins in a red wine. You can get that in some Grecchettos. So it just depends on what the winemaker wants to do, how they want to make their wine. But it's late ripening, so it's good. As a winemaker, you kind of want to hedge your bets, right? So you have different blends of grapes, different plots. Some are mid-ripening, some are early ripening, some are late ripening, because depending on the weather, you might need to put all your eggs in one basket or another. You don't always have a perfect season where you can harvest all three perfectly. So, for instance, the Fiano di Avellino is a mid-ripening grape, so awesome. So you don't have to worry about early frost or anything like that. Grecchetto, you have to worry more about early frost, and it's becoming less of an issue these days, thanks to global warming, but it still is an issue for sure. So let's get our noses in here. Tell me what you're tasting specifically in wine number 2. I know we did a comparison, but tell me your specific reaction, not to the comparison, but just to this Grecchetto. I already regret spitting that wine. It's so delicious. Why did I do that? Gonna have to have another sip now. Do y'all get that, a little bit of that bitterness? Like you bite into a honeydew melon and you bite too far into the rind, so you kind of get that bitter, not necessarily sour, like it's got acid, but it's got this bitter component to it that like you oversteeped your white tea a little bit too long or something. Awesome, yes. yes, sometimes blended with Malvasia as well. Awesome, great comment, Ryan. So Ada says, Alan likes number 2 better, seems more complex to me. Yeah, there's so much going on in both of these wines. I like the complexity debate a whole lot. That's it's been a recent harp of mine, is how complex is the wine, not how intense is it, but how complex is it. So I like all this talk about it. So Hope and Kevin, y'all said you like number 2 the most. Oh, that's right, you talked about the Orvietos, great. All right. Ripe citrus and minerality on the Greco. Yeah. It's way more, I get like softer minerality on that Fiano, but I get a lot more like, almost like pencil shavings dust on the Umbrian wines. We got a little more like schist, granite, rockier terrain. So while there's no scientific explanation for why we taste minerality in wine, there's also all the anecdotal evidence that says we do, so there has to be some reason. So Tawana says, almost reminiscent of tannins, although in white wine. Yes, that thicker skin contact. Albarino is a similar grape that does this. It has a really, really thick skin to it. So often Albarino has like this bitter kind of mouth drying sensation to it, which I love the complexity that adds. I'd say of the 2, the Fiano is definitely more like flamboyant. And the Greco is a little bit more reserved and shy. And it'd be interesting. I've had both of these wines aged, and it'd be interesting to see these specific vintages. I'm almost getting this like fresh laundry smell on wine number 2. This is it lavender? Something like pungently like fresh linen. Something a little bit like herbal or floral on that herbal floral range, either rosemary or lavender, that kind of crosses both boundaries. Really interesting. So the Greco is better, bolder as it warmed up. Yes. So white wines are typically served way too cold. If you just pull a white wine out of your refrigerator, that is 40 degrees, sometimes like 37, or sometimes 55 degrees, like my refrigerator was 2 weeks ago when I had to throw out all my food. So you want it to be, though, 37 to 40 degrees. And at that temperature, the only wine you want to serve at that temperature is like your really cheap stuff that you don't really want people to smell. You don't want to smell. So it kind of hides and masks the wine if it's that cold. As the wine warms up, it's going to express itself more. So if it ain't really good wine, it's going to express itself as such. If it's really delightful, complex, intriguing wine, it will express itself as such. So I recommend always experiencing the wine as it warms up in temperature. So I call it the 15-minute rule. So take it out of the refrigerator, always taste it first, and then take 15 minutes before you actually pour yourself a glass of wine. That allows it to come up to closer to like 50, 55 degrees temperature. And hopefully you get a lot more out of the wine. It will speak to you more in that way. So, all right. So of the 2 wines, we did a Southern Italian wine, a lot more, honestly, seafood culture in this area, tons of seafood culture, obviously with the Amalfi Coast right there and everything, and a little bit more like pork culture in there. Can you see how these wines better match with both of those foods? Or would you pair both of these wines with kind of similar foods? How would you pair both of these wines is what I should ask. So tell me, what you going to drink this with? And just know that I'm going to invite myself over if it sounds good. Awesome. So Tawana, you agree that the wines really do develop after warming up. Awesome. Now the reason in like the setup instructions, man, the acidity is so bright on that second one. It's hard to talk afterwards. My mouth is watering so much. Is because I want to see the progression, that change. So if you're just drinking the glass at home, set yourself up for that, because you're not going to take 45 minutes to drink 4 ounces of wine. If you do, you're doing it wrong, and I will teach you how to drink faster. Don't worry. All right, so between the two, anyone have an idea of a food pairing that you would recommend or you might try out for yourself or invite me over for when we can get past this COVID nonsense? Or, I mean, you can say that there's like, you'd rather just drink it by itself, and then that's totally fine too. Pair it with a wine glass is what I always say. So number 1, shrimp and scallop scampi. Yes, 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 yes. And number 2, not so sure. Okay, interesting. I want either crab dip, French bread, and some good cheese. Yes, either one of those with all of those things. Absolutely. I feel like calling Luce to order boar bolognese. Yes, yes. Especially once you get to the reds too. Absolutely. And oh, Lori. Okay, great. So here's what I would pair. Again, I really want white pasta. I love this scampi call. If I did a scampi, I mean, if you're gonna cook, let's do lobster scampi then, Lori. Honestly, the weightiness and the richness of that Fiano requires to me a little bit of a more like complexity and weightier food component. Of the Santinelli, I really want like carnitas tacos. I think would be delicious. So it goes along that wild boar style, but it's still summer and fresh because it is to me a fresher style of wine versus that Fiano is kind of dense and weightier. To me, just my experience with the wine. So, oh, all right, great. You let me know, Lori. I'll come over and I'll bring the wine. So.
Would
All right.
the higher acid in number 2 pair better with a fattier?
Yeah, so the question, if you didn't hear from the mic, some mom across from me asked, would the higher acid in wine number 2 pair better with the fattier, richer dish in of the let's say lobster scampi? So there's a couple strategies for food pairing, and it really depends on what you want to highlight. So acid does cut through fat. So if you have fattier foods, you do need more acid in your wine to cut through it. But also you want the intensity of flavor and kind of like the length of the finish to be along the same level. So if this is your food and your wine pairing and the flavor in your mouth, and after 2 minutes, the wine cuts off and like the flavor ends, the finish ends, but the food continues, then the food flavor is kind of going to dominate the whole pairing and you're not going to taste the wine. The wine will be drowned out. So to me, the more intensity and the depth of wine number 1 makes me want a richer dish, not necessarily because of the fat, but because the intensity and depth of the flavor. But wine number 1 has some acid still. It's got acid to cut through some pasta sauces for sure. I think wine number 2 has higher acid. And your acid in your wine should always be higher than the acid in the food, but not by this much. Kind of, you want it to be higher, but just kind of a couple steps forward to kind of freshen up. Acid lifts up the flavors in food. So if you have food, you have all these different flavors. They're kind of hanging out as two-dimensional flavors on your palate. Either a spritz of lemon on top or a sip of acidic wine will make those flavors become 3D, kind of lift out the basil in this and the red pepper flakes in here and the smoke in this and the char in this. Acid makes those flavors pop. They make them 3D. So acid is definitely important to cut through fat and to lift flavors for sure. So y'all ready to taste some red wine? Okay, so of the 2, can I get everyone to tally their vote? Again, because I never really ask this. I need to ask this more often. Which do you like more? Like which one would, if gun to your head, you can only buy one wine. Both of the wines are available though, because I'm not giving that option. Which one would it be? I'll give you my opinion shortly, but I'll let everyone say their opinion first. Yes, so if y'all live in Norfolk, Luce makes amazing boar bolognese. They also make a really great guanciale dish. So that's cheek jowl of the hog that will melt in your mouth and make you have dreams for years to come. Like it's that good. So Luce is like the place to go for Italian food in my book. So. All right, I love it. My parents never agree. Some mom says wine number 1 is her favorite. Some pop says wine number 2 is her favorite. So number 2, okay. All right, complexity of number 2. All right, number 1 over here. Sorry, Tawana, Luce is the name of the restaurant, Luce, meaning light. Chef Tony does a great job. So, all right, so it looks like we might be a little bit half and half. You know me, it's always hard for me to say a favorite. It's like picking just one pair of shoes to buy. I don't know if I could. I'd just buy them both. But if I could only have one wine to have a full glass of at the end of tonight, it'd probably be wine number 1. I love Fiano, and I think I just love everything made in volcanic soil. I don't know why I gravitate towards that, but that's just my palate. So, okay, Brad and Lori, y'all disagreed too. Okay, there we go. So it's okay. That's why
Buy both.
Yes, that's why it's not a bottle of gin where it's 20 servings in a bottle. It's just 4 glasses. Just buy both bottles and figure it out. So, all right. So whenever you're ready, we're going to transition to red wines. I highly recommend that you do not rinse your wine glasses out with water. Water is going to change the pH balance in the glass, and it's going to make it harder to smell the next wines. So if you have a dump bucket, or if you just want to drink the wine, just kind of shake it out and let all of the last drips come out. If you have a napkin, you can just flip it upside down on a napkin. That's going to absorb the last drips of the wine. That's the best way to do it. Your red wine will not be affected by a little tiny smidgen of white wine in the glass, but it will be affected by a tiny smidgen of water in your glass, interestingly enough. So red wine number 1, we are going to do this $4.99. The grape is called Fresia. It is from Langhe region in Piedmont, Italy. So we're in the north of Italy. And on wine number 2, so on the right, we're going to do the Petraio. I have a terrible Italian accent, but it's the Nero d'Avellino from Sicily, Italy. So that's wine number 2 on the right. So go ahead and pour yourself some. And again, pour yourself 5 ounces because we're going to take some time and get into the wine. Didn't mean to rhyme, but I like it. Nerd life there. Joanna says, way to upsell some, Mom, making us buy 2 bottles. Yeah, yes, you're right. I think some mom just wants her own bottle. It's true. All right. So y'all know the drill. Jump into tasting however you like. This isn't the blind tasting class, so we don't have to go through all of the steps. I will call our attention to certain taste points of these 2 wines more than I did with the white wines. But I do want to go over what these wines are and how they came about. So again, wine number 1 is from Piedmont, Italy, right here. So Piedmont in the north of Italy, right in kind of nestled into the foothills of the Alps. Very, very different culture, both food-wise, language-wise, culture-wise, religion-wise, like very drastically different culture than central or southern Italy where we were before. Italy as itself is very regionalistic. So unlike France, where they have a very strong national identity, that was primarily because of Napoleon. He really cultivated a national identity of France. So we are French first and foremost, and then you're from Burgundy or Bordeaux or the Loire or Languedoc. But first and foremost, you are French. Italy never had that strong central Italian identity creation and cultivation. So they would consider themselves from Piemonte, as they would say, not Piedmont, Piemonte first and foremost, and Italian is kind of like a distant third. So maybe Piemonte and then Catholic and then winemakers and then Italian. So very much their regional and local, maybe not even regional, but local, village-specific identity is very, very important to them, not only in terms of the food that they serve. So if you go somewhere and have a pasta dish that has seafood in it and you ask for cheese in it, they will kick you out of the restaurant. Like if you're in the South where it's more olive oil based instead of butter based like you are in the North, they will kick you out if you ask for that style of food. Pizzas are so different. You have mushrooms and risotto in the Piedmont area versus seafood and calamari in Sicily, just drastically different foods. So the wines are going to be very different too, because what grows together goes together. So the local food and the local wine are generally developed along the same time in history. So they are meant to be paired together. And Italians, above all, will not drink wine without eating food. So I can't tell you how many places we went to where we just ordered a glass of wine and a plate of something comes out. It could be potato chips, it could be nuts, it could be a piece of cheese, a piece of bread, something, olives. But you never go to Italy if you're not in like a touristy spot and order a glass of wine and something doesn't come out with it, because you should never drink wine without eating food. So if you have food that you're snacking alongside, notice that. Just try it by itself and make your opinion, and then try it with some sort of food. Doesn't even really matter what it is, and just see how that changes your impression of the food, for the better or for the worse. So in Langhe, which is one of the largest regions in Piedmont, kind of encompasses a lot of the smaller regions, specifically Barolo, Barbaresco, Asti, Alba, all of these regions that make some of the best wines in the world, arguably, but definitely in Piedmont, are kind of encompassed by the broader Langhe. So it's kind of like Hampton Roads encompasses Norfolk and Virginia Beach and Williamsburg and Newport News and all of these other smaller areas, but Hampton Roads is the larger area. So Langhe is that larger, more all-encompassing region. Fresia, the grape, is actually one of the genetic parents of Nebbiolo. So Nebbiolo is one of my favorite grapes, and it is like the king of Piedmont. Very masculine, very structured wine. Can age for like 30, 40, 50, 60 years. Insane age-worthy capabilities. Very, very sometimes rustic, tannic to the point of just like you have no feeling in your mouth for a minute after tasting some too young Nebbiolos that haven't aged enough. So Fresia, oddly enough, is one of the parents. So Fresia does have high acid and high tannins, but it also has this very high fruit quality and floral quality to it that it makes almost what I call starbursty wine. Sometimes I like starbursty wines, sometimes I don't. And I don't mean the candiness. I mean like the flavors are just kind of starburst. So you get this like acid pop, tannin intense over here, the fruit over here, the flowers over here, the woodsiness over here. It's kind of like a bunch of like pops of intense flavor that all aren't necessarily come together in a really cohesive way, but can be really interesting and dynamic. So quite arguably not the most balanced grape ever. I would never, if I could name 20 grapes that I would say could create the most balanced wines, Fresia would never be on there. But some fun, interesting, like start a conversation about the wine, then Fresia would definitely be up there on there. So I love like the density of the floral notes in this like strawberry and black cherry notes. So you got this like black fruit and red fruit, kind of candied, a little bit of smoky going on all across this. But the grape itself is also related to Viognier. So if you've ever had a Viognier, grows a lot in Virginia, native to France though. And Viognier is a very floral grape. It's very like pungent, almost tastes like perfume sometimes. So Fresia itself is the genetic parent of Nebbiolo. A couple other grapes happened in between to make that all happen. But is related genetically also on the DNA train to Viognier. And if you ever wonder where I get all this information from, because it's definitely not like on Wikipedia, there's this book called Grapes, and it's just a DNA and an encyclopedia of all of the grapes and all of their genetic heritage. So it is the nerdiest of all nerdy wine books, and it also costs like $250. So I don't recommend it unless you're like making your wine hobby past a hobby level. But if you really are interested in the genetic breakdown of all these grapes, it's a fascinating book for sure. Typically, Fresia in this area is actually made in a slightly sparkling way with a little bit of sweetness to it. I've only had a couple Freixas that are in this style, a dry red wine. This is unoaked. We are stainless steel in this, so there's no oak aging on this. This producer does make an oaked style. And I tried that recently and was very unimpressed, which is surprising because I have been so impressed by this wine. I served this wine by the glass at my restaurant in Virginia Beach when I had it a couple years ago. So tell me what you're smelling and tasting in this wine. All right, I'm sure you've actually already said, and I need to read the comments. Yes, Carolyn, can we just go back to Italy too? So I'm hoping next year I will have a trip to Italy. But we shall see how travel gets reinstated and such. So number 1, hints of prunes and eucalyptus. I love that herbal call. So I was thinking more like, man, my brain always tracks to like lavender and rosemary. But you're right. I love the eucalyptus call. And here's what I have discovered. And I've done this experiment now. Did this, I guess it's been about a week and a half since I've been doing this experiment. Sometimes I get in a rut when I'm tasting wine, and like all of my notes, if I look back, look very similar. I mentioned cherries and strawberries and herbs and woodsiness and mushrooms and all viable characteristics. But sometimes I take this and I go to a category that I never go to. And I force myself to just like write it down, even if it's not true. So I'm going to write down cinnamon. And then I let my brain decide, hell no, or actually, yeah. So I write down something that I think is not true and then allow my brain to figure out whether or not it's true or not. So, and that has actually increased my tasting notes and like the breadth of my tasting notes quite a bit in the last week and a half. So, all right, so now we're getting to number 2. Sorry. So number 2 is a 2017, so it's actually a little bit younger than number 1, which is a 2016. The reason why it's so different is because we're a cool climate Piedmont with very cool mornings, a little bit in the afternoon sun, then fog starts rolling in, so very long, slow, cool growing season, versus Sicily, Italy, which is the first rock that the boot of Italy is kicking. The second one is Sardinia here. And so we're Mediterranean island here. And while there is Mount Etna here, the volcanic outcropping that has very cool climate growing regions, Nera d'Avola grows on like the hot, warm, sunny vineyards of Sicily that are just baking in the sun all day. Nera d'Avola actually only grows best in these regions. So you get just more of this like kind of baked quality with the wine. And that can be very much related, like that's sometimes how older wine smells, that kind of like that dried out, baked, sometimes raisinated, stewy ness in the wine comes out. So, okay, so number 2, getting some cooked cherries with hints of mushrooms. Yes, more cooked fruits, dried fruits, pruny fruits kind of on that one. Number 1, jammy plums, mushroom, smoke, and tobacco. So we've got actually some mushrooms called out on both of these wines, which I think is totally fitting. I got mushrooms in the Greco too, so that makes 3 wines. So we might have like mushroom notes in our wine. So I'm not mad about that because I love mushrooms. So raisins and some wet hair, like
maybe wet straw.
Wet straw.
Something a little moldy, maybe.
Okay, all right. On number 2, wet hair. It kind of smells like shampoo. Is that
Good count, sure.
Okay. I love my dad. He will always say something that makes me go, I'm sorry, what? It's great. I love it. Keeps me on my toes. Yeah, and that floral note, definitely agree in the floral note for sure. Well, great to see y'all, Hope and Kevin. You can always tune into the rest of the recording if you want to afterwards, if you want to taste alongside us with us then. Awesome. And okay, fabulous. So we've got a Sicilian in the house here, and we didn't even get into the Sicily notes, but we'll get you next time. So thanks you guys so much for tuning in. All right, so all right, y'all keep tasting through both these wines. I'll talk briefly about the Sicilian wine, this Nero d'Avola. So this wine grape, the grape is Nero d'Avola, but it's just called the black grape, basically, from Avola, the city. It's also called Calabrese, and a lot of people refer to it as Calabrese, but Calabrese is, oddly enough, this is when you know you're talking Italian wine. Calabrese is also a synonym for Sangiovese, that grape, in other parts of Italy, even though they're not related at all. So the same grape name can be called correctly, but in different regions for different grapes. So it's just easier to separate it and call it Nero d'Avola instead of Calabrese, because that gets really confusing if someone thinks of Calabrese as Sangiovese. So just keeping you on your toes here. But it's definitely like the widest planted grape in Sicily, and it loves hot, warm weather. Like just like we have here when we're in a normal June with normal weather, where we have hot days that roll into hot nights where it doesn't really drastically cool down at night. This grape loves that. A lot of grapes don't like that, and they actually need that cooling down at night to be able to grow and develop into the most complex wine. And that is why, so if you follow wine news at all, there's this big news in the Bordeaux industry. So Bordeaux is the area in France that focuses on Cabernet and Merlot grapes. And there's only 5 grapes right now that are permitted to be grown: Cabernet, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Malbec, and Petit Verdot. Carmenere in just like small portions, but those are the 5 primary ones. Well, they're just now allowing, starting I think next year, some of the Portuguese grape varieties like Alicante Bouchette and Tinta Roriz and Tinta Barroca to be grown in Bordeaux. And that's because all of the currently permitted wine grapes really do better when they have cooler nights and warmer days. And now that everything's kind of warming up a lot, they're realizing they might need to permit and allow some grapes to grow there to bolster the wine. And those grapes need to be able to thrive in hotter days, hotter weather, longer heat strikes, less rain, less irrigation. And so we need to be a little bit more flexible in what grapes are allowed to be grown. So I'm interested to see in how Nero d'Avola changes and how it might actually develop more popularity in other regions that never grew it before, because it thrives so much better in warmer weather. So often it's blended with Frappato to make a classic wine called Cerasuolo from the area of Vittoria. But this is just 100% Nero d'Avola, and I think both of these wines are delightful, but now I'll get into tasting them and we'll talk about that. Great question. Ooh, and this is an interesting answer. How long does it take for a grape to develop in a new region? In terms of growing, very short amount of time. So you never plant a seed. You actually foster it in a nursery, and then you plant that young vine. And then after 3 vintages or three seasons, it will start producing fruit that can be picked. Some world-class wine comes from grapevines that are only 5-6 years old, so very young. But in terms of legalness, it depends on the region and depends on how legal you want to be. So if you're talking France, Italy, France would be the hardest. It takes decades sometimes for new laws to be passed to allow different grapes to be grown and developed under the name of Bordeaux. But in places like Napa, you can grow whatever you want, wherever you want, and as long as it comes from that area and you're following safety measures, you can grow whatever you want. So it really depends on the region. Italy, also strict rules like France, but definitely more of a history of pushing those boundaries. Same thing with Spain. Push the boundaries a whole lot, just like, oh yeah, I thought that was isn't that Cabernet? Oh, it's not. Oh, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. Like very much more of a history of that in Italy and Spain. France, oh my word, like no, that is not allowed. One drop of one other grape that's not permitted is not allowed. So great question. It all depends on the region, which is why, interestingly enough, Australia is becoming the new innovative wine region. It used to be California. California has stopped being innovative basically because they realized their cash cow is California Cabernet and Chardonnay. Why in the world would they grow Freesia or experiment with Fiano? Very few producers are doing that. And I'm actually going to do a class on those producers in a couple of weeks for the July 4th class. And I've got some of them in my funky red 6-pack. But Australia is being super innovative. So of all of these grapes, you can actually find producers that are making all of these grapes in Australia that aren't really found anywhere else in the world. So you can have an Australian Fiano, and an Australian Greco, an Australian Freesia, and an Australian Nero that they do not call Nero de Avila because it's not from Avila. All right, so what are y'all smelling and tasting in these wines? Number one is so plummy. It's just like straight up red plums that I bit all the way into like the plum. I mean, not the plum, obviously the plum, the pit. You kind of got that bitterness too. Yeah, it's super starbursty. I got this fruit over here, and then it's finishing really bitter, like black tea that's oversteeped. Acid's making my mouth water, and the tannins are lingering, making my mouth dry out more. It's a very dynamic wine, not balanced in the least, but it knows it isn't and isn't trying to be anything different. So I can respect that. So let's try number two. Wow, totally different noses. I would say both of these wines have kind of almost the same intensity of the nose. They're kind of rushing out at you. I got more of the aromatics on wine number one, more of just like the straight alcohol on wine number two, but probably because it's been sitting in this this glass for 20 minutes. To me, it smells more woodsy, almost like sawdust, smoked like campfire. Am I repeating your words? Nice. Saman for the win. She said smokiness and woodsiness too. And Tawana, is that on the taste or the smell? I haven't got into the smell yet. Sorry. Ooh. Straight up like a fig Newton. Yeah, this like figgy, it tastes like a fig Newton. Even the graham crackery, like bready thing around that, it's got like everything in that. The taste, okay, yes, there is a sweetness to it, yes. I'm glad the earthiness is there because I think the figginess, the dried raisinated components would kind of I think overpower the wine otherwise. So I'm glad the earthiness is there. Again, definitely not like a balanced wine, but not in a bad way. Sometimes balanced wines are so balanced that they become like, all right, I'm a little bored. I need something to capture my attention, but everything is melded together so much it becomes monotone. These wines are not monotone, right? We got a lot of people a cappella singing and some weird harmonies going on with both of these wines that I find intriguing. So number two, balance. All right, I stand corrected, but not very complex. Okay, yes, I would agree. Neither this wine isn't necessarily like loads of complexity for sure. Shorter finish. Okay.
Question about finish.
Yes.
You've added that new.
Yes.
What does the finish tell us about the grape or the grape wine?
So also, I added something else that I forgot to mention that Saman pointed out. So on here, we have finish that is added here, which wasn't there before. And it is also on here. How long does the taste linger in your mouth? Now, let me differentiate for you. There is finish and there is aftertaste. Finish is good. Aftertaste is bad. If you you know, if you have that first date and oh man, it does not go over well, and you kind of just like left with that bitter taste for a long time, like that's an aftertaste, right? That's bad. Like an aftertaste is something that lingers and gives a negative emotive reflex. A finish is you just continue tasting that wine for a long time, and it's a positive thing. So some delicious wines out there have a very short finish, and that's just their characteristic. Some have a very long finish, and again, that's just their characteristic. You can have high quality wines that have short or long finishes. Now, obviously, if it's a delicious wine, you don't want the flavor to end, so you kind of want a longer finish. If it ends too short, then that speaks to maybe a lesser quality wine. But sometimes the wine goes on so long that you're just like, all right, I've got to like taste something else in my mouth here. So basically, the only thing it really leads you to decide is whether or not you like that taste in your mouth and the food that you might pair with it. So again, if you have food and wine that you're pairing together, you want the finish in your mouth, the flavor in your mouth to last the same amount of time. So if you have Ossobuco with a Pinot Grigio, well, the Pinot Grigio is going to end right here, and that flavor of the Ossobuco in your mouth is going to go out for 2 minutes after you finish eating it. But if you do Ossobuco with a Brachetto, with a Dolcetto from Italy, the flavor is going to both last for a long time. That's why steak and Cabernet go together. Well, it's because both flavors are intense and they both last a long time. So the finish is really more of this qualitative and just subjective thing that you have to decide whether or not you like. So if that makes any sense. So number 1 has a longer finish. Number 2 dissipates quicker. Okay, great. Well, going back to number 1, after the Fig Newton of number 2, it's like straight up blueberry juice, like almost like lingonberry. Have you ever had lingonberry juice before? It's like that blue fruited, but like intense with a bitterness to it. It's a Norwegian thing. Yeah, and the finish is definitely lingering. I wouldn't say it's a very long finish, but compared to the 2, so far, like I'm still tasting it. So it's like what, we're at a 45 seconds. All right, let's try number 2. Let's see how long it lasts. Kind of more intense peak and also a more intense drop off. Yeah, so I mean the difference in price range, just so you know, we're looking at like a $22 bottle for the Fresia, and we're looking at like a $15 bottle for the Nero d'Avola. So accurately shows a little higher quality for that Fresia and a little bit like an easier everyday drinking profile for wine number 2. So oh shoot, I said I wasn't going to say that until we started talking about our overall conclusions. I'm sorry. We were talking about qualitative rationale with pricing and the finish. So I apologize. I let the cat out of the bag too soon. So let's then talk about our overall impressions of these wines. So did you like both of them? Were both of them interesting to you? Or are they more like very situationally specific? I would really like this one with this food in this place. Or is either one of these something that you could find on your everyday wine shelf? This Fresia, man, I love this Fresia so much. Sorry, I try not to give my opinion, but it's sometimes really hard not to. So, Lori, number 2 is the Nero d'Avola, the Petraio, the Nero d'Avola. And are you asking which wine is number 2 or like the price point? I could just smell this Fresia for the rest of the night. I think it's so delightful. Anyone have any impressions of Oh, which one was 22? Sorry, I am as far away. So the Freesia is about 22, and then the Nera d'Avola is about 15. And I love them both for the price points that they have. If they were reversed, I'd buy a truckload of the Freesia. But I think they're both like priced appropriately, and so I will be stocking both of these in my house. Which, just so you guys know, I never get paid to feature wine. No one gives me free wine to like write reviews on. I don't get any like kickbacks or anything like that. I actually pay to sample these bottles so I can decide on my favorites and feature them. So I only feature wine I believe in. I only feature wine I believe delivers value. So I'm not going to feature wine that costs $50 that I think is really only worth $30. So I work really hard to taste through a bunch of different wines and find interesting wines that you don't find everywhere else that over-deliver for the value. So that is always, always, always my goal, and I do not get paid for that in terms of like kickbacks from any winery. So, so Tawana says, I enjoyed both. Wanted to have one with smoked prime rib. Okay, yes. Number 2 with Parmesan crusted salmon. Okay, I can see that. Yeah, I mean, that would be very much more the food differences of these two regions. So northern Italy, you're not really going to have any seafood. You can have that richer style food. Sicily, all about that seafood. On Vivino, coming in an average of, okay, wow. So Vivino says the average of 1895 and 1858. So very, very exactly. So, and again, so Virginia is really different. You know, we're a 3-tier distribution state, so I have to get it from a distributor who gets it from an importer. And so Virginia pricing honestly changes a lot from the rest of the nation if they're not 3-tier distribution. So whenever I go on like wine apps that have like average pricing, it's so frustrating sometimes because I get one wine a lot cheaper or one wine a lot more expensive. So I always mark up an appropriate amount. I'm never going to price gouge or anything like that, but sometimes, yes, it is different than what's online. So that is interesting. So you're getting a steal for the Nera d'Avola then. All right, cool. So of all, you'd pay more for each. All right, cool. I like that. I like that answer. So the white wines are definitely a little bit higher end. I definitely went higher end on the white wines than these. The white wines are definitely more in the like 25 and to 33-ish price range. But I can't quote you on that specifically right now because my brain is dead. I can't remember which one each one was, but I will send that email out for those. But hopefully this class allowed you to expand your horizons of Italian wine more than just Sangiovese, Pinot Grigio, and Moscato. Those 3 things are delightful in their own respects, but Italy has so much to offer. There's over 1,500 indigenous grape varieties. I have been in this business now for 12 years, and every month I still look through. I record all of my tasting notes, and I keep all of my tasting journals, and I look through them sometimes just to get fresh ideas. And every time I look through them, I'll notice off and on, I write down a wine bottle, and I just write down something, and I circle the thing and put a question mark because it's a grape variety that I have never heard of before and I've never tasted before. And it's always Italian, and it always just expands my horizons and opens me up to the broader idea of what wine is and how it fits into our life. So I love that Italy always keeps me on my toes and keeps me guessing, and I think it's fabulous. So I hope you guys enjoyed the class. If you have specific questions about any of these wines, please don't hesitate. You all have my email address. You can email me and text me. All of these wines are available to purchase if you want them. I'll send you all information about that. Next week, just so you know, next week is blind tasting class. This is going to be different than any of our other blind tasting classes that we've had beforehand. We're going to do 4 wines, which is the same, but all 4 wines are going to be the same grape. So first we have to decide what is that grape. Then we have to break down which region each one comes from. So we're taking our blind tasting skills up to the next cha-chonk level. Like here's where we were, and we were tracking at that for a while. we're going up to here. So you're gonna be like real legit blind tasters. So it's gonna be loads of fun. It's gonna be challenging in a very different way. And you're gonna have all of the tools and resources, and I will guide you along every step of the way. So it will be an appropriate challenge for you. But if you want to do that, let me know as soon as possible so I can get those wines out to you. And I hope to see you next Wednesday. We're gonna be doing this every Wednesday. So tell all your friends they can tune in for free and order the wine if they want to taste alongside us. So so glad that you guys enjoyed the wines. If there's, again, any questions or comments you have, let me know. And I look forward to seeing you next Wednesday for the blind tasting. And yeah, can't wait. I'll see you later, guys. Bye. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there and to my lovely Sun Pop. I will be off social media for the weekend so that I can hang out and drink great wine with my family. So I will see you all soon, and happy Father's Day, and stay safe out there. Cheers.